Hello, Happy New Year and welcome back to Football League World TV for 2022. We're kicking things off this year with the weekend review. I'm your host Alfie Burns and joining me are my two colleagues Ben Wignall and Toby Wilding. Ben, how are you getting on? Good Christmas and New Year?
Yeah, all good this side of the Pennines, Alfie. Had a good trip out to Stoke yesterday, which we'll discuss in a little bit. So yeah, it's been a good start to 2022 for me.
Good stuff, Toby. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Thanks. A good New Year and everything. Bar the as we're saying, bar the positive lateral flow. But we'll soldier on. We're not doing too badly at the minute, and looking forward to getting into some really good games again to talk over.
Absolutely. Before we get going, we're streaming across YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter this morning. So please, if you're joining us, get yourselves in the comments. We want to hear from you. Right, first up, we're going to look back at some of the Championship action. First game on the agenda, we're going to look at Bristol City 3, Millwall 2. Andy Wyman with a hat-trick here. It was a little bit of a late comeback for the Robins at Ashton Gate. Ben, impressed with the sort of spirit they showed to come from behind here?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I think Bristol City have been pretty poor this season, you have to say. They always have aims of being in them kind of playoff positions. And when Nigel Pearson came in, I think you would have thought that, he's got promotion with his division before, but they didn't do too much with the squad in the summer. And you've got to think if it wasn't for Andy Wyman, where would they be? He's got 12 goals in 25 now after his hat-trick, but they're still, even though they have had a bit of a poor season, they're still showing some signs of life and some signs they can push up that table. And, in a season where there's a lot of inconsistency in the Championship, they could potentially move up that table with a few wins. And, it's not just Vyman that's, he's scoring the goals, but they've got, Hanno and Masengo, Alex Scott, young players that are, really stepping up when they need to. You just need to sort that inconsistency out like a lot of teams in this league do, but it was certainly a great comeback for Bristol City and a very good win.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Andy Wyman doing the damage, a real mix of finishes I felt for his hat-trick, close range finishes, the long range finish for the first one as well. It's 12 goals for the season now. And Wyman's a player that I always feel he's got these performances in him. Over the season he's got a lot of braces and now this hat-trick. Ben, I'll stick with you here. Do you sort of feel that Wyman's a little bit underrated in terms of the Championship?
Probably, yeah. He's had good seasons and he also had, quiet season. I think he was injured for quite a little bit along with Jamie Patterson last season, and he's not always been an out-and-out striker as he's played in the number 10. He's played out wide, so he's never really had that, consistent run of being in that kind of goal-scoring position. But playing up front for Bristol City now, he's getting those kind of chances and, put him as the leading man, and he's clearly reaping the reward. So I think, at the age now, he's kind of at his peak age in his late 20s where, he should be performing now, but he's kind of at the age where you probably don't expect him to, improve to become like a Premier League player. So I think he's at the right club for now at Bristol City, scoring the goals, and, he's probably going to be their main man for the rest of the season.
And what about you, Toby? What are your thoughts on Wyman? Obviously a really sort of good hat-trick this weekend. Underrated, overrated? Where do you think he sits?
Yeah, I think he probably is a bit underrated. Maybe has gone a bit under the radar in comparison to some of the players. Certainly, he's sort of getting into that range now. He's sort of, with the exception of the sort of clear runaways, he's one of the sort of top scorers in the Championship. And I think you've got to sort of credit Bristol City for the business they did, and maybe to a certain extent the risk they took on him in the summer. Obviously, with his new contract, because he only had a handful of appearances last season, as Ben sort of touched on, due to injury. So to sort of give him another 3-year contract on the back of that over the summer, perhaps maybe, like I say, was a bit of a risk, because you're never quite sure how a player's going to come back from that. And obviously, having done that, he's been absolutely brilliant for this season. And it's sort of that chance that they've taken on him has really paid off massively for Bristol City, because, as we say, they could be in an even more difficult position than they are if they hadn't brought him in. I mean, you look at that result against Millwall, and you sort of think if it hadn't been for his goals, it's another defeat that sort of keeps them within reach for those sides battling against relegation, and it keeps the pressure on Nigel Pearson, who's never really quite got them going in the way you might have expected them to. So yeah, Wyman's an absolute massive player for them, and clearly he's going to be a big threat to a lot of teams in the Championship.
We've had a couple of comments in. First up from Harry, Wyman criminally underrated in his opinion. And also one from Ian, always thought he wasn't given much of a chance at Villa. Wyman is a talented player. Quick word on Millwall then, Toby. They're a little bit inconsistent, I feel, to be deemed genuine playoff contenders. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, off the back of performances like that, absolutely. I think with the greatest of respect, the sort of position that Bristol City are in, and maybe sort of the inconsistency they themselves have had with their home form recently. If you really want to be going and getting into a playoff place this season, then for Millwall, that is probably a game they should have been looking at as one they've got to go and win. And having been in that position where coming from behind to take the lead, to then not hold on to it and give it away as they did, is going to be hugely frustrating. And I think we sort of see maybe the lack of almost a Vyman themselves is perhaps costing them. Obviously, I mean, Tom Bradshaw, the top scorer with 7 this season, and that's sort of quite a way short of what you'd expect a team to have in terms of a top scorer if they are going to break into that top 6 this season. So again, that is potentially something that they need to be looking at now in January with the transfer window open.
Absolutely, a disappointing afternoon for Millwall. Right, next up, we're going to look at Birmingham versus Queen's Park Rangers, a 2-1 win for QPR at St Andrews. Albert Adoma and a great Chris Willock solo goal doing the damage for QPR, which sends them crashing back into the Championship's top 6 at this moment in time. They've got games in hand as well. Ben, what do you sort of feel QPR's aim should be from here?
Well, I'm not particularly sure they're good enough for the top 2. I mean, but I didn't think Blackburn were a few months ago, but look where they are now. I think they still got frailties, maybe at the back. I think Steve Cook would have been a really good signing just to show up those, defensive kind of shortcomings, and they probably might go for an experienced centre back in January instead of him. But I think they've got a lot of depth, and they can rotate players at wing back. They've got a lot of options, and in kind of attacking midfield areas, you've got options as well. So I think the aim right now should be the playoffs. I think if they go on a really good unbeaten run, they could push for the top 2. But I just think that Fulham, Bournemouth, and West Brom just have a kind of stronger options to have like a second wind. I know they've all been in inconsistent form recently, but I think those 3 teams can push on to be the top 2 challengers, and QPR will be one of those teams that will be in that playoff push. But they've certainly got if Elias Chair's not performing, then Chris Willock is, and he's been one of the standout players this season. And that goal that he scored, taking on about 3 or 4 defenders, it was quite majestic. You could probably say it was a bit sloppy defending at some parts in Birmingham for both goals, but when there's solo goals like that, there's not really a lot you can do. And attacking wise, QPR have got a lot of bodies up there, and they're showing that they should be a threat for the rest of the season.
Ben sort of touched on it there about your club Blackburn, Toby. Do you feel that QPR could put sort of this Blackburn type run together, over the next couple of months to put themselves in top 2 contention?
Yeah, they've got the potential to. I mean, even going as far back as sort of last season, the way they finished the second half of that campaign was really sort of that promotion playoff form for certain. So they've definitely got the quality there. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see maybe how the Africa Cup of Nations impacts that. I know obviously they've got a few players who are going to be going away for that. So, that might have a bit of a negative impact on them. But nevertheless, when you've got the likes of Chris Willock who can step up and produce moments of magic like that, Albert Adoma, obviously hugely sort of reliable player, stepping up as well there. He can still do the business at this level, even at the latter stages of his career. So they've got players there to sort of perhaps cope with that pressure of, whoever they might lose sort of in the next couple of weeks. And yeah, they've got the talent to do it. They've got the form. They know they can do it based on what they produced the second half of last season. And if some of those players, say an Elias Chair, goes and has a brilliant tournament, then the confidence he comes back with could be absolutely huge, and that could give them a bit of momentum as well. So I don't see any reason why, at the very least, QPR shouldn't be a top 6 side come the end of this season, particularly if they are able to do a bit of sort of business as well in January. Obviously, as Ben said, Steve Cook will be a bit of a miss, but there's other players out there they can go and get. And when you look at the position they are in, they do have to be considered probably quite an appealing destination for a lot of potential targets.
Absolutely. In terms of Birmingham, they're without a winning 4 now. They're still quite comfortable, just sort of at the bottom end of the mid-table spectrum, maybe. But Toby, do you sort of feel that they just, need to be a little bit wary of things becoming uncomfortable during the second half of the season?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think you look at maybe there's a 1 or 2 teams below them that have a game in hand here or there that could put a little bit of pressure on them. I still think they should have enough to keep clear, but it's even so, it's not sort of what I expected from them this season. I mean, you look at the way Lee Bowyer really seemed to galvanise them the second half of the previous campaign, and then I was quite impressed with the business they did in January and in the summer, with who they brought in. So I was expecting more from Birmingham, shall we say, this season than what we've seen so far. So, I mean, yeah, there is still that element of it. If they can't get the wins and the pressure keeps building and questions might start to be asked about Bowyer, and if all that sort of snowballs together, then, they've still got results they'll need to pick up to make life easier for themselves. But even if they do that, which they probably should, if you look at the options they've got available to them on paper, it's still at the minute looking like being something of a almost below par campaign for them.
We've had another comment in from Ian. If Anike can play to his potential, Blues should be okay. Right, moving on to Monday's action. We're going to go to Stoke 1, Preston North End 2. Ben Wilmot there with a goal of the season contender before Potts and Hughes struck for Preston to take the points back to Deepdale. Ben, you were there in the away end. What an impact Ryan Lowe's having at Preston at the moment. It feels like the club's completely sort of turned a corner under him, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we're playing the same system as Frankie McAvoy did, but it's a lot more, expansive on the front foot. And to be fair, the first half yesterday wasn't great. It was kind of 2 teams cancelling each other out. Stoke had a few chances, but the second half was where it really opened up. I don't think anyone saw Ben Wilmot's goal coming. It kind of flashed before my eyes. I just looked up and he'd had a shot from about 35 yards and it just flew into the top corner. Of any keeper in the world would have stopped that. But to be fair, we reacted well to it. I think Daniel Johnson's playing a really important part in this, new Ryan Law system. He likes having 2 midfielders who really attack, and he got into another good position to cross to Brad Potts, who, he's had a lot of criticism from PNE fans recently. And Ryan Law put him at right wing back. He likes putting midfielders out there. He tried it with Ali McCann in his first game against Barnsley. Didn't quite work out, but Potts just seemed to be a good fit for that. And he kind of had a Di Canio-esque scissor kick goal, which was just as good as Wilmot's, in my personal opinion. And then obviously Andy Hughes got the header for the winner. It was a good performance, and we saw it out. That's, some teams we've seen this week. We saw Reading, which we'll touch on in a minute, like a 2-goal lead slip, but we just let it see the game out very, very nicely. And it does seem like we've kind of turned a corner. I'm reluctant to say we're, a completely new team after just 2 games. We've got a bigger test coming up in Sheffield United and West Brom in the next few weeks. But the fans are, back on side. It was a sellout away end yesterday and a very good atmosphere. And Ryan Law's definitely, got the fans on side. He's saying what we all want to hear. I know that's a Plymouth fans a little bit because he did the same for them. And, we get a barrage of abuse of those fans on Twitter for that. But it's all pointing in the right direction. And obviously, we've got a few games in hand now. So hopefully we can get some more points and get up that table into the top half.
Absolutely. As for Stoke, they've sort of stumbled through the last 6 games or so, and they've just sort of missed out on a chance to sort of cement themselves in the top 6, I'd say. Been quite bad timing, hasn't it, Toby, given how Huddersfield and Middlesbrough are going at the minute?
Yeah, definitely. And I think you've got to say that perhaps that result will be really frustrating for them, especially after taking the lead. I mean, from a personal perspective, you almost feel sorry for Ben Wilmot that a goal of that quality has ultimately been in vain. It's not counted for anything. But I think beyond that, we've sort of, as Ben touched on, the games in hand. This is a Preston side that have been out of action for quite a few weeks. Obviously, I think cases within their own squad had an effect on that. So, you may be coming into this one thinking, has Ryan Lowe really had the opportunity to put his own mark on this team, or is there still going to sort of be the shades of inconsistency that we saw under Frankie McAvoy earlier this season? And that might have presented itself as an opportunity for Stoke to get back on track here. But obviously, as we've seen, they haven't done that. So it's now back-to-back defeats at home for them, having sort of been in positions to get something from those games. So that's really frustrating. And then, as you say, with the form that other teams are on, if they can't snap out of that quick, then they could very quickly sort of and find themselves, perhaps being a little bit cut adrift from the top six, which would be really disappointing for them, given how the season started. And I think sort of now, obviously, they've got Leyton Orient in the FA Cup at the weekend. It's going to be sort of interesting to see how they approach that one. You maybe think sometimes you want to give them players a rest, sometimes you want to go all out, and you maybe think, do Stoke need to really attack that one and, maybe try and get a big score on the board against lower opposition to build up that confidence and momentum again. So that's going to be really interesting to see off the back of this run, where sort of what looked like being a promising season for Stoke has certainly hit a few hurdles.
Elsewhere yesterday, Reading 2, Derby County 2. Junior Hoylett with a brace to put Reading in complete control, but late goals from Colin Kazim-Richards and a brilliant Curtis Davies header, secured Derby another point at the bottom of the table. Firstly, on Reading, Toby, this was a really frustrating afternoon, wasn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, from the position that they were in, they shouldn't have been coming away with anything less than 3 points from that game. I mean, it was sort of a fantastic return to action for Junior Hoylett after his sort of injury. It was a reminder of what he can still do at this level. He's a quality player at this level. He's shown that for so many seasons and did so again yesterday. Sorry. And then, to be in that position, I mean, you feel for Luke Southwood, the goalkeeper. Obviously, he made a brilliant save just before that second Hoylett goal. To keep out Tom Lawrence and stop Derby making it 1-1. And you think at that point he's almost contributed to winning them the game. But then obviously it goes down the other end with just a few minutes remaining, and it's a cross he should have held that Kazim-Richards really nods in, you feel. So you've got to have sympathy for him there. And obviously, but he's made some excellent saves throughout the season. He's shown his quality, but it's not the first time that something like that's happened. Obviously, I think going back to the whole goal in the 1-1 draw there, Malik Wilks' striker probably should have held on to that. So it's a really sort of tough time for him. The quality's there, but he's a young keeper and he's almost learning on the job maybe with some of these errors, given the sort of situation with Raphael, who seems to sort of almost be out of the picture for a bit. So that's sort of a difficult balance for Reading to find themselves having to try and maintain, especially with the points deduction, which means this was a big miss in terms of trying to put a bit of real daylight between themselves and the bottom three, and they've not been able to take that, and that's going to be tough to take. And from that position, Paunovic, it feels like he's got perhaps a bit of a job on his hands now to lift them again and get them to bounce back going forward. Absolutely,
and we've got to talk about Derby here. I've got a comment in from me, and you've got to admire Derby's fighting spirit and, dare I say it, Rooney's loyalty. Obviously, that's with reference to the fact that Derby are bottom of the table after a 21-point deduction and likely facing relegation to League One. But they're not going away, are they, Ben? How impressed have you been with Derby in recent weeks?
Very impressed. I think, listen, without the 21-point deduction, I think they'd be, it's all ifs and buts, but they'd be on the same points as Sheffield United, I think, in mid-table. And that shows how good of a job Wayne Rooney is doing, with his hands pretty much tied, no takeover done yet. He can't do any business in the January window, you'd imagine, until it's sorted out. And I don't think it will be sorted out personally until after the window. So, I think he's got to stick with the squad he's he's got, and with performances like this, they're having late comebacks quite a few times recently now, and the win over Bournemouth last month, I genuinely believed he could potentially climb out of the relegation zone. They're on 11 points at the minute, but Barnes on 14, Peterborough on 19. It's going to be a tough ask to, get in the 30, 40 points mark, and they're going to have to go on have a lot of wins, but definitely showing with the experience they've got mixed with the young players with the likes of Jason Knight and Max Bird. They've got, a decent, first 11 if they don't get any injuries. You've got Bielik coming back as well. So I think all in all, Rooney's doing a fantastic job, and if they do go down, it won't be, for the want of trying. They're all giving their absolute all for the cause, and I think they're giving Derby fans something to be proud of this season.
Absolutely. Right, next up, we're going to look at League One. We're going to start right at the top of the third tier with Rotherham's 2-1 win over Bolton Wanderers. Michael Smith with a brace, sort of wrote down on the notes who else. He's having an absolutely fantastic season. But Rotherham first as a whole, after defeat on Boxing Day, it was a good show of character this to get the victory over Bolton, wasn't it, Ben?
Yeah, and I think it's why some people probably think that, champions elect, they're a team that, tend to go up and just don't have enough to stay in the Championship. Maybe next season will be different, but they do certainly seem to be one of those few teams that are really, going on a really good run of form before Boxing Day. I think it's like 17 games unbeaten. They're so solid, they can grind out wins, and I think the squad they've got keeping most of that together from last season's Championship season. I think it's really helped them out. They've got a lot of experience in there, and Bolton, I know they're not in great form, but just pushing aside a team with a lot of experience in itself is, a good sign that Paul Warren's side are, still at it going into 2022, and their aim is definitely going to be to, win the league once again.
Yeah, Michael Smith with the goals again, and I feel like we say this on almost every show. He's one of League One's top strikers. Toby, obviously in the transfer window now, we won't get stuck on transfers too much, but given how important he is to Rotherham, if interest comes in, they're going to have to rebuff it out there.
Yeah, I think they are, and obviously that's going to sort of be a bit of a risk for him financially with his contract as it stands. I think coming to an end this summer, so that means they might end up losing him for free at that point if things don't go well in the next few months. But when you consider sort of how much promotion back to the Championship could be worth to them, then yeah, absolutely. In short, it's a risk worth taking, because you think potentially that could bring so much more to the club from that financial perspective than selling Smith this month, and then potentially because of that not having the goals that they need to get promotion.
Absolutely. Ian has been back in the comments. He thinks that if Rotherham can keep the core of their side together, then he truly believes that they'll get promoted. As for Bolton, it's 3 defeats on the spin now in League One. Just a quick word on them, Ben. Are you worried about how the second half of this season might shape, or is this just a little blip and they can turn it around?
I'm not sure. They've had I think they had a good first few months of the season, and back then I thought maybe they will be playoff contenders, but I think since October time, they've not really been in the greatest of form. They've got enough experience in the squad to be a solid mid-table team for now, and maybe that's why they need to be aiming for, just put the building blocks in place for next season, because they've definitely got, a squad capable of going further. They've already put a few $100,000 behind the signing of Dion Charles from Accrington this month, and I think he might need a few weeks to get up to match fitness, but Owen Doyle potentially going back to Ireland could be a big miss for him. I know he's in his 30s now, and he scored over the weekend, but he's got goals in this league before, and if he does go back, it will be, I think, for personal reasons, but it will be a big miss, and I don't think he'll be in trouble, relegation-wise, but I think Bolton fans have been getting a bit frustrated lately about performances. It's no shame losing to a team like Rotherham, who should be right up there at the end of the season. But I think Bolton do need to freshen up a little bit in certain areas of the pitch. You brought Marlon Fossey in from Fulham as well in defence, so they're doing business, and it'll be interesting to see where they end up squad wise at the end of the month.
Elsewhere in League One, probably the game of the day in the division, Morecambe 4, Doncaster Rovers 3. Doncaster were 3-0 up in this game, but Morecambe struck 4 unanswered goals to clinch the points. Toby, this was massive for Stephen Robinson's side, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely huge. I mean, you sort of look at the context coming into it. Obviously, this was Morecambe up against the bottom side in Doncaster, coming off the back of a defeat to second bottom Crewe in midweek, a game they'd led, but then by all accounts a pretty shoddy performance from Morecambe, just sort of really allowed Crewe back into it and to pick up a really big win for them and put Morecambe bang under pressure, drag them into the relegation zone. So, it made this a huge game just coming into it for Morecambe. It was absolutely must win to sort of snap out of the sort of run they've been on. So then to be 3-0 down at half time, I mean, you really did, even at that stage, sort of fear for them for the rest of the season, given with the greatest of respect who they were up against in the bottom side. So then the response from them to sort of go and win, that was absolutely incredible in the second half. And I mean, obviously Cole Stockton, a couple of goals for him. Who else is going to play a part in that to really get them back into the game? But I think as well, what was really significant was seeing Jonathan Obika on the score sheet for the Shrimps as well. Obviously, he came in the summer from St Mirren, but then picked up an injury quite early on in the campaign. So he just never really had the chance to get going. So now he's working his way back in. And for him to get that third goal for Morecambe and his first for the club to bring them level, I think is absolutely massive, because if and it wouldn't be a surprise if it was to happen, interest was to arise in Stockton over the next few weeks, they're going to need someone else to start getting the goals if they are to have any hope of staying up. And so Obika getting off the mark is really significant for them. And then obviously it's an absolutely stunning winner from Toumani Diarguaga as well. What a hit that was, and so fitting that it's sort of him who's come up with that, with sort of the role he's played in that centre of the park for Morecambe. He's been such an enforcer for them. So for him to then be the one to step up and fire them into a massive 3 points like that was hugely significant. And yeah, I just think the lift that's going to give them. Obviously, it's going to be huge, and they've got Tottenham coming up next week in the cup. So obviously, no one's going to be expecting anything from them from that. But which sort of makes it a free hit. It means if they can do themselves justice with a performance, then that's still almost, in a way, we'll see them maybe carry a bit of confidence on from what they've built on from this. And it's just what they needed if they were going to have any chance of preserving their League Two status this season. And what a way to do it.
I've got to admit, having watched Big Tums play for Leeds for 12, 18 months, I didn't know that he had that in the locker. It was an absolute stunning strike. As for Doncaster, from 3-0 up there to come away with nothing and be cut adrift as they are at the bottom of the table, it kind of sums up their season so far, doesn't it, Ben?
Yeah, they've had a pretty poor one. They dispensed of Wellens last month, and I don't think Gary McSheffrey really showed enough, in the few games he was manager to, land the job on a permanent basis. And I think the fans have seen through, it being the cheap option. I remember seeing last week when it got announced, there was a lot of criticism over it. And when you're 3-0 up, you just can't lose from kind of that position. It's kind of unforgivable, and it's not a great way to start a permanent reign as manager. I can't help but agree with the Doncaster fans who think it is a poor appointment and a cheap option. They do have, they have talented players in the squad. They've got some good loanees like Galbraith from United, but for some reason it's just not clicking this season. Unless they make some moves this January transfer wise, I can see him being in real trouble. But you can't take away the fact that Morecambe were the catalyst in this, just coming from 3-0 down. They've been, after a promising start, they've been struggling a little bit in recent months, and but with Cole Stockton scoring all the goals he has, I think they will be in a relegation battle by the end of it, but I think they're going to fight till the end. Small budgets in the division, they're doing what they did.
Absolutely right. Next up, we're going to look at League Two. Lots of goals in League Two over the weekend. We're going to start with Swindon 5, Northampton 2, two of the leading sides in the division. Harry McCurdy here with for girls. We seem to have lost Toby for the time being. So, Ben, one of those days for McCurdy where everything he seemed to do went right.
It must be that dodgy Blackburn connection for Toby. He's back. 9 in 17 for McCurdy, which, considering he's not an out-and-out striker, I think he's naturally a winger. But playing through the middle this season, it's a very good record. Swindon not won in 3 before, the Christmas postponement. So I think getting 2 wins on the spin now, I think that postponement kind of period came at the right time. It might have done for, a few teams. It's kind of refreshed the bodies and, for the most part, Ben Gorn is doing a good job. There's a bit of criticism when he got appointed because he didn't do a great job at Bristol Rovers and got sacked there. But, he's got a young, vibrant squad for the most part, added with a little bit of experience with the likes of Johnny Williams. And this was kind of a statement result because they're both in the top 7, Northampton and Swindon. And, it's closed the gap between the two teams. And I think Swindon, on paper, they've got a better team than Northampton for my liking. And I think this will only breed confidence for Swindon.
Yeah, you've mentioned there, that these are 2 of the sort of top 7 teams in League Two. Northampton still sits second, but dropping points, it really tightens it up again between maybe 2nd and 7th. Obviously, even Exeter down in 8th aren't too far off that, but say between 2nd and 7th, Toby, I think we're almost setting up for another blockbuster finish to the League Two season already, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely. As you say, Forest Green are going to be absolutely loving this, the top of the table, obviously, and another win for them at the weekend. And they've sort of got a 7-point gap even to Northampton in second with a game in hand as well. So, that looks like theirs to lose. But as you say, behind them, there's so much still to play for. And it does look like it's going to be absolutely fascinating, obviously, both for the automatic promotion and the playoff picture, if you want. And obviously, sort of looking at the games played, there's very little difference in terms of sort of the matches played, because in comparison to sort of the other divisions where the postponements have perhaps been a bit more spread out, it's almost been a bit more blanket in League Two. So there's not too many teams who really have a great deal of games in hand to make up on other sides. So even there's no clear candidate who you might think could put a run together here and really steal a march because of that. So it's going to be absolutely fascinating to watch. There's so many sides in there who are going to be fancying the chances right now, and it really does set it up nicely for the second half of the season in League Two and that promotion race.
Absolutely, a goal fest between Swindon and Northampton. Another goal fest elsewhere in the division: Walsall 3, Newport 3. Connor Wilkinson making all the headlines here, going from hero to zero to hero again. 2 goals and 1 own goal for Wilkinson on quite an afternoon. You don't see many of those, over the course of a season, do you, Ben? Particularly with the way that he put in the equaliser in the last minute.
Yeah, it was like 2 keep-uppers, weren't it, and top bins. I think he's always had the talent to play a little bit higher than League Two. He was at Bolton when he was younger, but he's showed for Leyton Orient and Walsall that he's a bit of a goal scorer. And I think Walsall in general, they've only lost twice since the end of September in League Two. And, for his first job in senior management, I think Matty Taylor's doing a half-decent job, quite quietly. I think they're in mid-table now, but I think they've definitely got the scope to push on with the kind of young team they've got. And getting a last-minute equaliser like this against a good team in Newport will, they'll give them confidence going for the rest of the month and the rest of the season. Probably, like a lot of teams, need 1 or 2 more fresh bodies for that kind of playoff push, but I don't see why they can't with results like this.
Absolutely. Ian's been in the comments. He thinks that Wilkinson's equaliser was amazing. Goal of the day for sure. If you've not seen that, you need to go check that out. An absolute peach. As for Newport, Toby, a little bit of an opportunity thrown away this weekend, wasn't it?
Yeah. From the position they were in, absolutely. As we say, we're sort of talking about the promotion race there, and they're obviously one of the many sides who are right in that. A win would have seen them really close up the gap on the automatic promotion places. So they'll be really frustrated, I think, not to have come away from that with all 3 points, especially given, sort of as Ben says, Walsall a bit mid-table, they're not quite finding the consistency at the minute. So again, there was maybe an opportunity there, and having been handed the lead back from a Wilkinson on goal, he only came on a few minutes after half time, didn't he, to do all that? So they'll be absolutely shell shocked. I think, especially with that. I mean, it had echoes of Andre Gray for QPR at Derby the other month, that equaliser for Wilkinson, didn't it? So when you concede into a goal like that at that stage of a game, it's got to be really tough for Newport to take in the circumstances. But even so, I mean, I've sort of said a few times before, I was really impressed with Walsall's business over the summer. I think they're a good side for this level, that perhaps it just hasn't quite clicked perfectly. So nevertheless, it's not a bad sort of reflection on Newport to be going and getting themselves in that position. It's almost a one-off they conceded to. So there's still positives there for them to take from that. And obviously they're far from out of the playoff or even the automatic promotion picture. So it's not all doom and gloom for them, far from it. But yeah, it'll be a bit of a difficult one to take, the way they lost a couple of points there.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot.
What about Alfie? Dom Telford's got 16 in 15. I'd be amazed if he's not getting a move this January. He's out of contract. He's out of contract as well. So I think League One or Championship teams will probably be having a little bit of a look at him. I think he scored twice, didn't he, in this game? So could be one to keep an eye on.
There we go. There's Ben's prediction for the debate show in the next couple of days. That's where he thinks the transfers come in. Yeah, there's plenty to play for in League Two in 2022. And that concludes the weekend review. Thanks to Ben and Toby for joining me and anybody that's joined us in the comments. Later up today, we've got the EFL Transfer Zone with Sam Rourke. There's plenty of deals already going on across the EFL, so make sure you tune in for that. Between now and then, take care.